Human exile saves alien child in meteor storm. Faces queen with crystal wings and slavers. In the heart of a burning desert under a storm of falling stars, a broken human soldier rescues a dying alien child and finds himself hunted by slavers, betrayed by his own people, and torn between two women who could change the fate of the galaxy forever. This is not just survival. This is war, passion, and the fire of destiny. The desert sky of Orvian never slept. Even at night, the planet glowed with restless veins of molten rock visible beneath its crust, like fire trapped under glass. On that particular night, the horizon tore itself open with fire. A meteor storm streaked across the atmosphere, burning the heavens in orange and white. The rocks screamed as they fell, some exploding in midair, others hammering into the empty mining plains. The sky was all fury, and Eli thought it looked like the universe had decided to finally burn the past away. He leaned against the hull of his battered shuttle, grounded like him, and dragged on a half-dead cigarette that had lost most of its flavor years ago. His days of fighting in the Terran skies were far behind. Now he was just another scarred man hiding on a forgotten world, watching fire rain down and pretending it didn't matter. The storm reflected in his tired eyes, and he muttered under his breath, "Better you than me." But then, something cut through the chaos, something not made of flame or stone. A sound, a cry, thin, almost swallowed by the wind, but distinct enough that a man who had lived through too many battlefield nights recognized it instantly. It wasn't metal tearing. It wasn't stone splitting. It was a voice, high, trembling, weak, a child's voice. He froze, the cigarette dropping into the dust. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No child should be out there. Not in this storm. Not in this desert where even grown men barely survived." Against his better judgment, because better judgment had long ago told him to keep his nose out of other people's misery, Eli pushed himself off the hull and ran. The desert floor shook as meteors crashed in the distance, each impact like the thud of giant fists. Sand whipped against his skin, sharp and stinging. His boots pounded against the ground, leading him toward the sound. And then he saw it. At first, he thought it was debris. A pale shape crumpled against a rock. But then the shape moved, trying and failing to crawl forward. The firelight of the storm revealed something small, fragile, not human. Its skin shimmered faintly, a pale silver that caught the storm's light like water. Its eyes glowed golden even in pain, and its tiny frame was curled around itself, trembling. The child. An alien child, no more than 7, maybe 8 in human years. A pair of wings, tattered, translucent, glimmering like shards of crystal, stretched weakly from its back, one bent at an impossible angle, the other cracked. Blood, if it was blood, sparkled like crushed gems where it dripped onto the sand. Eli's throat closed. He knew what he was looking at. Stories traveled, even out here. There was a species hunted across half the galaxy, their wings coveted, harvested, ground into dust to fuel engines, weapons, and black market pleasures. The crystal winged of Zerathia, extinct in many systems. And here was one of their children, broken in the middle of a storm. If the slavers caught wind of this, if anyone caught wind of this, "Damn it," Eli muttered. He crouched, pulling the child into his arms before his mind could convince him otherwise. The boy, or girl, he couldn't yet tell, was light as a feather, trembling against his chest. Its eyes fluttered, half closed, and a whisper escaped its lips. He couldn't understand the words, but he understood the plea. "Help me." The meteors fell closer now, one smashing into the ground barely 200 meters away. The shock wave knocked him off his feet, but he tightened his hold on the child, rolling with the impact until he landed hard against the side of a dune. Pain shot up his ribs, but he pushed himself up, coughing dust. He couldn't leave the kid out here. He couldn't leave it at all. He wasn't that man, no matter how much he pretended he'd stop being a soldier. He ran. Through fire and dust, he ran. The child pressed to his chest, its broken wing trailing a faint crystalline glow behind them. By the time he stumbled into the rusted metal shelter, he called home. His lungs burned raw, and his arms ached from clutching the fragile body. He slammed the door shut against the storm and collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. For a long moment, there was only the sound of his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then the child whimpered, a small pain sound that stabbed deeper than any blade. Eli cursed under his breath and laid the child on his bunk. Up close, the damage was worse. The wing wasn't just broken, it was shattered, its crystalline structure cracked like ice. His medkit was pitiful, barely enough to keep himself alive. But it was all he had. He pulled it out, hands moving fast, instinct taking over where logic would have told him to stop. The child's golden eyes followed him, wide with fear, yet trusting enough not to resist. Eli swallowed. "You picked the wrong wreck of a man to fall into, kid," he said softly. "But you're alive now, and I guess that means I've got work to do." He worked through the night, splints fashioned from scrap metal and bindings torn from his own clothes, antiseptic hissing as it touched the shimmering wound. The child cried out once, a high ringing sound that almost shattered him, but he kept going, murmuring words he hadn't used in years: comfort, reassurance, nonsense to soothe fear. When at last the child collapsed into exhausted sleep, Eli sat back, sweat streaking his face, and stared at the small, impossible creature lying in his bed. His cigarette was still out there in the dirt. He didn't even miss it. For the first time in years, his exile felt like something more than just waiting to die. When dawn came, the desert outside smoldered with craters, the storm finally spent. Inside, the child stirred, and Eli realized with some surprise that he'd stayed awake all night, watching. He hadn't dared sleep, not while every breath of the child seemed too fragile to last. Now those golden eyes blinked at him, heavy with exhaustion, but no longer clouded with pain. The broken wing glowed faintly, pulsing with some inner light, and for a terrifying moment Eli thought it might shatter again. But it held. The child tried to speak. The words were soft, musical, strange. Eli shook his head. "I don't speak your language, kid." He pointed to his chest. "Eli." He tapped himself again. "Eli." Then gently he pointed to the child. "You?" The child hesitated, then whispered something like Kyle. The name shimmered in the air, as if the sound itself carried crystal dust. Eli nodded slowly. "Kyle," he repeated. The child gave the faintest hint of a smile before closing its eyes again. Eli's gut twisted. He knew what this meant. He'd seen enough wars, enough slave caravans, enough cruelty. If Cal was here, alone, wounded, then someone was hunting. The Zarathian wings weren't just valuable. They were a currency of power. Somewhere out there, a mother had lost her child. Somewhere out there, killers were already scouring the desert. And Eli. Eli had just placed himself in the center of it. The knock didn't come that day or the next, but he could feel it, like a storm building. Every time the wind carried a sound that wasn't familiar, his hand drifted toward the old rifle propped against the wall. Every time Cale whimpered in sleep, Eli felt the years of his solitude breaking apart. He told himself he'd put the kid on the next transport, send him back to whatever was left of his people. But deep down, he knew better. He wasn't letting the slavers have him, not while Eli still breathed. On the third night, as the stars stretched cold across the sky, he heard it, the low hum of engines. Not meteor fire, not desert wind. Engines, several. His blood went cold. He rushed to the door, peering out across the dunes. Lights moved in the distance, small but steady. Too steady. Ships. Patrol craft, most likely. Slavermake, judging by the formation. His jaw clenched. Behind him, Cale stirred, whispering something in that alien tongue. Eli turned and froze. The child was sitting up, golden eyes wide, wings trembling. A glow filled the small shelter, rising from the fractured crystal of his wing. And then, impossibly, the glow shaped itself into an image. A woman's face, sharp and fierce, crowned with hair like liquid silver. Her wings, whole, radiant, breathtaking, spread behind her like a storm of light. She looked not at Eli, but through him, as if speaking to her child across some impossible distance. The voice that filled the room was both fierce and breaking. Eli didn't understand the words, but Cale did. Tears welled in the child's eyes as he reached toward the light. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vision shattered. The glow flickered, the wing dimmed, and Cale collapsed back into sleep. Eli sat there staring at the empty air. His hands trembled. That wasn't just a hallucination. That was a call, a mother's call. And if the child could project it here, then she would be coming. And if she was coming, so were the hunters. Because if Eli had seen it, anyone tracking the resonance would have too. He stood slowly, picking up the rifle. His exile was over. He hadn't chosen it, but war had come to his door again. And this time, it wasn't just about survival. This time, it was about a child with wings of crystal, a mother's voice in the dark, and the storm of fire still echoing in his chest. The desert night had always been cruel, but that evening it pressed in with a weight that made Eli's skin crawl. The engines were still faint on the horizon, searching, circling like wolves that had caught the scent of prey. He stood at the door of his shelter, rifle tight in his grip, every instinct screaming at him to run. Yet when he turned back, he saw Cale's small frame curled on his bunk, the fractured wing glowing faintly like shards of moonlight. Running was no longer an option. He kept watch until his eyes burned, until the stars blurred into one endless sweep of cold. At last, exhaustion pulled him down into the chair beside the bunk. He meant only to close his eyes for a moment, but then the air shifted. Warmth pressed against his skin, not the desert's dry heat, but something softer, charged, alive. His eyes snapped open. She was there, not a vision this time, not a flicker of crystal light, but a woman. Flesh, wings, breath, presence. She filled the room like a storm disguised as a dream. Her hair was silver white, tumbling down her back in wild strands, catching the dim lamplight until it looked like threads of fire. Her wings were folded tight behind her, vast arcs of crystal that glowed faintly with a dangerous beauty, every shard humming with restrained power. She was tall, graceful, her frame wrapped in fur and leather that clung close, revealing more than it hid. Her eyes, amber, luminous, locked on him with a feral intensity that made his throat dry. Eli rose slowly, rifle still in hand. "You're real," he said, the words rough, as if dragged out of his chest. The woman's gaze dropped briefly to the weapon, then back to his face. Her voice was low, edged like a blade. "Human." The word was strange on her tongue, but it carried no confusion. Only recognition. Only danger. Cal stirred at that moment, whispering a soft sound, and the woman's focus snapped to the child. In an instant, she was across the room, dropping to her knees beside the bunk. The fierceness melted into something raw, aching. She touched the boy's face with trembling fingers, brushing the hair back. "Kyle," she breathed, and the sound was both prayer and promise. The child murmured something, leaning into her touch, then slipped back into sleep. Eli lowered the rifle slowly, because pointing it at a mother who looked like she could rip the metal apart with her bare hands felt like suicide. He cleared his throat. "He was out there, in the storm. I patched him up." His words stumbled, heavy, clumsy. "He would have died." The woman turned her head, her gaze cutting into him with something fierce. Suspicion, gratitude, and a hunger that wasn't entirely about food or safety. Her amber eyes lingered on him longer than necessary, tracing his scarred jaw, the muscles still firm beneath the years of exile. She rose tall enough that he felt smaller in his own shelter. Her wings brushed the walls with a crystalline chime. "I am Lyra," she said at last. The name vibrated like crystal struck by wind. "You saved my son. For that—" She paused, eyes narrowing, as if weighing a decision. "You are not my enemy." Eli tried to breathe, but his chest was tight. Lyra was impossible. Every detail of her presence bent the room around her. The way her fur garments clung to her shoulders, sliding down to reveal the pale, smooth skin beneath. The faint scars along her collarbone, glowing under the lamplight like marks of survival. And her wings, alive, breathing almost, their light flickering against the walls until the whole shelter seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. He realized too late that he was staring. She caught it. Her lips curved, not into a smile but something sharper. Dangerous amusement. "Human eyes wander quickly," she said softly, "even in danger." Heat flushed his neck. He wanted to deny it, but the truth sat thick in his throat. He'd spent years alone with nothing but his ghosts. Now suddenly there was this woman, this alien warrior, standing so close he could feel the faint hum of her energy against his skin. Every sense screamed at him to step back, and yet he didn't move. The engines outside roared closer. Lyra tilted her head, listening. Her wings stiffened, sharp crystal edges catching the light. "They hunt us!" Her voice dropped lower, almost a growl. "The slavers! They followed the resonance!" Her gaze snapped back to him, hard and demanding. "You know what they want." Eli nodded grimly. "Your wings." She stepped closer. The distance between them shrank until he could smell her. Earth and fire, smoke and wild air. Her hand, without warning, brushed against his chest. Just a whisper of contact, but his pulse thundered in response. Her eyes searched his, and in them he saw more than suspicion. He saw calculation, need, a flicker of something raw and undeniably feminine. "You saved Kale," she said again, softer now. "Why? Humans sell us for shards, kill us for sport. Why not you?" The question cut deeper than any blade. Eli swallowed hard. He could have said many things. That he was tired of blood. That he'd buried too many children already. That maybe saving Kale was the only decent thing left in him. But what came out instead was raw, unpolished truth. "Because I couldn't leave him." For a moment, silence wrapped them both. Lyra's eyes softened, only a fraction, but enough to make the air between them shift. The engines outside howled louder, shadows sweeping across the sand. Danger pressed close. But in that instant, Eli felt only the weight of her hand still against his chest, the warmth bleeding into him, the curve of her lips as if she might say something reckless. Instead, she stepped back, wings spreading slightly, their light flaring like a shield. "Then we fight together," she said. Her voice was iron wrapped in silk. "And if we live, you will not regret saving us." The promise in her tone wasn't only about survival. Eli felt it burn through him, deeper than the desert's heat. And as he gripped the rifle tighter, preparing for the storm that was coming, he realized his exile had truly ended. Because now he was no longer just one broken man in the desert. He was a man standing beside a woman with crystal wings. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The slaver craft descended under cover of night, their light slicing across the dunes in cruel sweeps. Eli crouched at the narrow window, jaw clenched. "They're close. Too close." Lyra stood behind him, her silhouette fierce against the lamplight. She hadn't taken her eyes off him since the engines had grown louder. There was a weight in her stare that unsettled him more than the ships outside, as if she were reading his soul, stripping away every excuse he'd ever wrapped around himself. "You have fought before?" she said. Not a question. "Yeah." His voice was low, flat. "Too many times." "Then you know what waits outside." He turned to face her, and nearly forgot the danger. She was so close now he could feel the faint vibration of her wings, humming like crystal under strain. The light from them played across her skin, highlighting the curve of her neck, the rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. He knew this wasn't the moment for distraction. And yet his body betrayed him. Her gaze flickered downward, catching the shift in his breath. Something in her expression changed, softened but sharpened at the same time. Her hand lifted, slow, deliberate, brushing against the scar along his jaw. "You are scarred," she whispered, "but not broken." The touch burned him. He didn't know why she was doing it, gratitude, instinct, or something more primal, but he couldn't move away. His hand rose almost on its own, fingers grazing the edge of her wing where crystal met flesh. The texture was alien, smooth and hard, yet warm with a pulse that felt alive. Lyra's lips parted, a sound escaping her throat that was neither pain nor fear, but something far more dangerous. Their eyes locked. Suspense hung in the air, heavy, unbearable. The slaver engines roared louder outside. But inside the shelter, the world had narrowed to one impossible truth. A human man and an alien woman, standing too close, breathing too fast, one touch away from something neither had planned. Then Kale stirred on the bunk, whimpering. The sound shattered the fragile tension, pulling them both back from the edge. Lyra drew in a sharp breath and stepped back, wings folding tight once more. Eli let his hand fall, though his pulse still thundered in his veins. Her voice was steady when she spoke again, but her eyes betrayed her. First we survive, then she let the word hang, unfinished, charged. Eli forced a grim smile, raising the rifle. Then we'll see. Outside, the slaver craft touched down on the desert floor, sand rising in violent storms around them. The hunt had arrived. And inside the shelter, a man and a woman, scarred human, crystal-winged alien, stood ready, bound by more than survival now. Bound by something dangerous, something electric, something neither could name yet. The desert night held its breath, and so did they. The ground trembled as the first slaver craft landed, its engines screaming against the sand. Dust whipped across the desert, rattling the walls of Eli's shelter. Inside, the air was tight with silence, but Eli could feel Lyra's pulse in the room, humming like electricity. Her wings shifted, brushing against the low ceiling, light refracting in shards across the walls. He steadied his rifle, heart pounding a rhythm that matched the tremors under his feet. Kyle stirred again, small body twitching in fevered sleep. The sound made Eli's stomach clench. They had no time left. Lyra's amber eyes met his. "They will smell his blood," she whispered, "and mine." Her voice carried both fury and something close to despair. "They never stop, not until every wing is broken." Eli swallowed hard. "Then let's make sure they don't leave this desert." She stared at him for a long heartbeat, then inclined her head once. A pact, not spoken but bound. The first door breach came like a thunderclap. A plasma charge struck the outer wall, burning molten scars into the metal. The structure groaned. Eli dropped to one knee, rifle aimed, body remembering every instinct he thought he'd buried. Lyra stood behind him, wings arched wide, her presence filling the shelter like a war banner. The door gave way. 3 figures stormed inside, their armor gleaming under the lamplight. Helmets shaped like skulls, eyes glowing red, rifles humming with plasma coils. Slavers of the Velquar Syndicate, hunters who saw living beings as currency. Eli didn't wait. He fired. The shot punched through the first helmet, dropping the slaver in an instant. The second swung his weapon toward him, but before he could fire, Lyra moved. She didn't strike like a human. She was light and violence, wings slashing through the air with crystalline edges. The wing caught the slaver across the chest, armor shrieking as shards of crystal carved into it. The man screamed, stumbling back. Her second strike drove him to the ground, shards embedding deep. The third slaver froze, shocked by the sight of a winged woman cutting through steel. Eli finished him with a clean shot. Smoke filled the shelter. Kyle whimpered. Eli lowered the rifle, chest heaving. Lyra stood over the fallen slavers, wings dripping faint light like blood. Her eyes burned, wild and radiant. But when she turned to Eli, her breath caught. He was watching her not with fear, but with awe. "You fight like a storm," he murmured, his voice rough. Lyra tilted her head, chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. "You fight like one who has lost too much." The moment held, then shattered as another blast rocked the wall. More were coming. Dozens, maybe more. "Back exit," Eli barked, slinging the rifle and grabbing Kale in one swift motion. The boy's fragile weight pressed against his chest, a reminder of what they were fighting for. He turned to Lyra, and for a second his gaze faltered. Her body was taut with adrenaline, wings flared, skin glowing with sweat. She was both terrifying and beautiful, raw and unbreakable. He forced his focus back to the fight. "Move!" They burst through the rear hatch just as the shelter caved under another strike. The night exploded with fire. Plasma bolts streaked past them, tearing through the sand, filling the air with the stench of burning rock. Lyra spread her wings wide, their glow throwing shards of light into the dark. Slaver eyes snapped toward her like moths to flame. "Cover me," she shouted, voice ringing like crystal. Eli dropped behind a dune, setting Kale gently down in its shadow. "Stay down, kid," he muttered. Then he rose, rifle snapping up, firing shot after shot with ruthless precision. Each slaver that dared move into the open fell, their armor sparking under his aim. Years of exile hadn't dulled his soldiers' hands. If anything, they had sharpened them into something colder. Lyra was a vision of war. She moved with lethal grace, wings slashing, scattering shards of light that blinded their attackers. At one point, she leapt into the air, wings catching the desert wind, lifting her in a radiant arc before she came crashing down on two slavers, crystal edges slicing through armor like paper. Her cry echoed, fierce and unrelenting. Eli almost forgot to breathe watching her, almost forgot the danger, until one bolt ripped past his shoulder, close enough to scorch. He ducked, rolled, fired back, cursing. There were too many. For every one they dropped, three more surged from the dunes. The Velquar wanted their prize badly. Eli's rifle clicked dry. He cursed again, fumbling for another magazine, but his gut clenched when he realized the truth. He didn't have enough left. Lyra landed beside him, wings trembling, blood streaking her arm. Not hers. Slaver blood, black and thick. Her chest heaved, her lips parted. She looked at him, eyes blazing. "We cannot hold them." Eli loaded his last magazine with a snap. "We don't have to hold them. We just have to break them." A laugh, sharp, breathless, escaped her lips. Even in the fire of battle, the sound tangled with his nerves in ways he didn't understand. "Human madness," she said, but she didn't step away. She stood beside him, wings raised, ready to burn the desert with him. And then the night cracked open. A slaver transport, larger than the rest, descended over the dunes. Its floodlights swept across the battlefield, blinding. The roar of its engines drowned everything. And when the dust cleared, a figure stepped out, a giant draped in armor carved with gold. His helmet was bare, his face scarred and cruel, eyes glittering with hunger. He carried no rifle, only a blade forged of black plasma. The hunters parted for him like shadows fleeing fire. Lyra stiffened, wings folding protectively around Kale. Her lips curled back, a low growl rising from her throat. "Vekor," she whispered. The name dripped with hatred. Eli's stomach twisted. He didn't know the name, but he didn't need to. One look at the man told him this was no ordinary slaver. This was the wolf leading the pack, and he was looking at Lyra like she was already his. Vekor's voice carried across the dunes, deep and smooth like oil poured over fire. "The last queen of Zerathia," he said, "alive, and with her whelp. My fortune grows with every breath you take." Lyra's wings flared wide, light cascading off them in a defiant blaze. "You will not touch him." Her voice was thunder, fierce and unyielding. Vekor smiled, slow and cruel. "Oh, I will take both. The child's wings will fetch me power. Yours." His gaze lingered, dark, possessive. "Yours will be a crown." Eli felt something snap inside him. The slaver's words, the way he looked at Lyra, not as a warrior, not even as prey, but as property, ignited a fire in his chest hotter than any plasma. He raised his rifle, sight locking on Vekor's face, but the man moved with terrifying speed. One swing of his black blade, and the rifle's barrel melted into slag. Eli cursed, dropping the weapon before it burned his hands. "Human," Vekor said, almost amused. "Why stand with her? Do you know what she is? Do you know what her people did to yours?" Eli spat into the sand. "All I know is what you're trying to do now." The slaver chuckled. Then like lightning he lunged. Eli barely had time to roll aside, the blade slicing a line of fire across the sand where he'd stood. Lyra screamed, wings slashing forward, crystal edges clashing against the black plasma. The sound was unbearable, metal and crystal screaming together. Sparks exploded in every direction. For a moment, Eli thought Lyra might fall, but she held, her wings trembling under the force, eyes blazing with fury. Vekor shoved harder, snarling. "You are the last, Lyra. Surrender, and I may let the boy live." Her answer was a wordless cry. She pushed back, wings glowing brighter, light flooding the battlefield until even the slavers shielded their eyes. The clash became a storm, black plasma against crystalline light, sparks raining like fire across the dunes. Eli staggered up, scanning the ground desperately. His rifle was useless. But there, half buried in sand, a slaver's fallen plasma carbine. He dove for it, rolling as another shockwave from the duel sent sand spraying. He grabbed the weapon, spun, aimed. A slaver rushed him. Eli fired, the bolt punching through armor. Another came, blade raised, and Eli shot him point blank. Rage powered his aim, every shot a promise. They would not take Lyra. They would not take Kale, but the tide didn't stop. The slavers swarmed like ants, driven by hunger for crystal. Eli fought like a man already dead, each shot, each strike buying only seconds. His arms ached, sweat burning his eyes. Yet he never stopped, because Lyra was still standing. Her wings glowed so brightly now they were almost blinding, each strike scattering shards that cut through armor and flesh alike. Her hair clung to her skin, her chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. But she was relentless, until Vacor struck her wing. The blade sliced deep, and Lyra screamed, stumbling. Light shattered across the battlefield as one of her wings fractured, shards falling like broken stars. Kyle's cry pierced the night. Eli's vision went red. He charged, weapon blazing, screaming like the soldier he once was. Bolts hammered into Vacor's armor, sparks erupting. The slaver snarled, swinging his blade toward him. Eli ducked, barely, the heat searing across his back. Then Lyra moved again. Even wounded, even broken, she rose. Her eyes locked with Eli's for a heartbeat. Silent, desperate communication. They would not survive this fight alone, but together. She spread her fractured wings, light flooding through every crack, every shard. The glow intensified, building, humming, rising into a pitch that made the dunes tremble. Eli understood too late. She wasn't striking. She was unleashing. "Lyra!" he shouted, but it was too late to stop. The explosion of light tore across the battlefield, swallowing everything. Slavers, ships, sand, sky, in a storm of crystal fire. The desert was silent. Not quiet. The silence was heavier than that. Oppressive, as if the entire world had been stunned into stillness. Where once had stood slaver craft and armored killers, there was now nothing but charred sand and shards of crystal light fading into the night. Smoke curled upward in lazy, uncertain streams. The air shimmered with heat. Eli lay on his back in the sand, chest heaving, ears ringing so loudly he almost couldn't hear his own groans. His rifle, or whatever slaver carbine he'd stolen, was nothing but melted slag beside him. His hair smelled faintly of burnt ozone. His ribs hurt. His everything hurt. But he was alive. Against every expectation, against every goddamn law of probability, he was alive. Something warm and heavy shifted against his arm. He turned his head and froze. Lyra lay sprawled half across him, her silver hair tangled over his chest, her breath warm against his neck. One of her wings, fractured, glowing faintly like an ember refusing to die, curved around them both like a canopy. For a moment, Eli forgot how to breathe. Then Lyra groaned, the sound low and raw, and pushed herself up slightly. Her amber eyes flickered open, dazed, then narrowed. "Human," she rasped, voice like broken glass smoothed by silk. "Still here," Eli croaked. "Still in one piece. Mostly." He winced as he tried to sit. Lyra shifted fully upright, brushing sand from her skin. The movement pulled her fur wrappings aside for an instant, baring pale, scar-etched flesh beneath. Eli snapped his gaze away so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Her lips curved in something that might have been a smirk, even through her exhaustion. "Your eyes," she murmured. "They betray you faster than your tongue." Heat rushed to his face. "I was checking for wounds," he muttered. "On my chest," she teased, arching a silver brow. "I've seen people get stabbed in stranger places." He shot back, but the dryness of his tone only made her smirk deepen. For a fleeting heartbeat, the battlefield felt absurd. The two of them, half buried in sand, corpses of slavers smoking around them, her wings broken and bleeding light, his ribs probably fractured, and still finding room to argue about where his eyes had wandered. Eli huffed out something that might have been a laugh, though it came out more like a groan. "You almost blew us both to hell, you know that?" Lyra tilted her head, feathers of crystal quivering faintly. "And yet," she said, her voice carrying that strange Zarathian lilt, "you are still alive. You should be thanking me, not complaining." He squinted at her. "That thing you did, whatever it was, it nearly cooked me." Her expression softened unexpectedly. "It nearly cooked me too." She touched her fractured wing, flinching at the pain. But it was the only way. They both fell silent, staring at the ruined desert. Slaver armor melted into black puddles, ships torn apart like paper. Nothing moved, nothing dared. And then, a sound, a faint, soft whimper. Eli jerked upright. Kyle! He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain screaming through his body, and stumbled toward the dune where he'd hidden the boy. Lyra was only a breath behind him, her limp barely noticeable in her fierce rush. Kyle was there, small and trembling, his golden eyes wide as he clutched his knees. His broken wing flickered faint light, but he was alive. Hey, Eli whispered, dropping to one knee. Relief crashed over him so hard it made him dizzy. You're all right. You're all right, kid. Lyra fell beside them, scooping Kyle into her arms. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering words in their native tongue. Kyle clung to her, sobbing quietly. Eli looked away, throat tight. There was something too raw in that moment, too sacred for him to intrude. Instead, he scanned the horizon, rifle instinct twitching even though his weapon was useless now. The desert stretched empty, silent, but silence never lasted long. Slavers had a way of crawling back. He sighed, scrubbing a hand down his face. We can't stay here. Someone else will come looking. Always do. Lyra glanced at him over Kale's hair, her amber gaze sharp again. Where do you propose we go, human? The desert is wide. The stars wider. Eli hesitated. He hadn't planned beyond surviving the night. He'd been good at surviving, alone. But with them, it was different. Every decision carried weight now. Every breath. My shuttle's dead, he admitted. Grounded for years. But there's an old mining outpost north. Abandoned, last I checked. If we can reach it, maybe we find shelter. Maybe supplies. Maybe a ship worth stealing. Lyra studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. Then we go north. Eli exhaled slowly, relief laced with dread. And that was when Kale sneezed. A tiny, unexpected sound in the middle of devastation. Lyra's wings twitched in surprise. Eli blinked at the boy. Did he just... Kale sneezed again. This time a small spark of crystal dust puffed out of his nose, shimmering in the moonlight before drifting to the sand. Eli stared. Well, that's new, Lyra sighed, pressing a hand to her face. It is not ideal. Not ideal, Eli repeated, half choking on a laugh. Your kid sneezes glowing glitter. That's not just not ideal. That's a damn beacon. Every slaver within 10 miles is going to follow the shiny trail. Cal sneezed again. More dust, Eli groaned. Perfect. Lyra's lips twitched, betraying the smallest hint of a smile. You saved him, she said softly. Now you deal with the sneezing. Eli threw his hands up. Of course, naturally. That's my life now. Babysitting a glowing sneeze machine while every armed bastard in the sector wants to cut his wings off. Lyra's quiet laughter was the only sound that cut through the ruined desert that night. They set out north at dawn. The desert stretched endless and merciless, dunes rising and falling like waves of golden ash. Eli carried Kyle on his back, the boy light as a feather, his tiny arms looped loosely around Eli's shoulders. Lyra walked beside them, wings folded close, every step both graceful and weary. For a while none of them spoke. The silence wasn't hostile. It was survival, a rhythm of sand and breath. But eventually Eli couldn't help himself. So, he muttered, is this how it works with your people? You show up in some poor bastard's shelter, blow half the desert sky high, and then stick around like it's his problem? Lyra gave him a sidelong look, eyes glinting. You could have left. You did not. Yeah, well, Eli muttered, adjusting Cal's weight. I've got a bad habit of making poor choices. You call saving a child poor? He glanced at her, surprised at the sharpness in her tone. She wasn't teasing now. Her eyes burned with something fiercer. No, he said after a moment. His voice softened despite himself. That's the one choice I don't regret. For a moment, Lyra's expression faltered. Something vulnerable flickered there, quickly masked by her usual steel. She looked ahead again, her wings catching the early light. Then maybe you are not as broken as you pretend to be. Eli snorted, trying to cover the strange heat crawling up his neck. Don't go psychoanalyzing me, all right? You've known me 5 minutes. 5 minutes in war is enough to know a soul, she replied simply. He didn't have an answer to that. The awkward silence stretched until Kyle sneezed again, sending another puff of glittering dust into the wind. Eli groaned loudly. "Oh, really? Again?" Lyra's lips twitched. "He cannot help it. It is instinct." "Instinct? My instinct is to not paint a glowing arrow over our heads while running from slavers," Eli shot back. "Maybe teach him your instincts." Kale giggled softly against his shoulder, apparently delighted by his own sparkling sneezes. Eli sighed. "Yeah, laugh it up, kid. We'll see who's laughing when we get ambushed by some merc chasing glitter trails." Lyra's laughter finally broke free, low and melodic. It startled him more than any battle. He looked at her, and for a second he forgot about the sand, the danger, everything. Her face, illuminated by morning sun, was softer when she laughed. Less warrior, more woman. He looked away quickly before he said something stupid. They walked until the sun burned high. By then Eli's legs ached, his throat dry, his patience thin. The boy's sneezes had mercifully slowed, but not before leaving a trail of faint sparkles in the sand. When at last the outline of the old mining outpost rose from the dunes, rusted towers, half-collapsed storage silos, Eli nearly dropped to his knees. "Thank God," he muttered. Lyra tilted her head. "Which God? Whichever one doesn't want me dead today." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. The outpost was empty, at least at first glance. They slipped into the shadow of a collapsed hangar, moving cautiously. Eli lowered Kale gently to the ground, stretching his aching shoulders. "Stay close," he told them both. Scavenged plasma carbine, ready in his hands. Lyra arched a brow. "Do you always give orders to queens?" Eli snorted. "Do queens always ignore good advice?" Her lips curved, but she didn't answer. The silence of the outpost pressed in, broken only by the creak of rusted metal shifting in the wind. For a moment, Eli let himself believe maybe they'd found safety, and then a voice echoed from the shadows. Well, looks like the rumors were true." Eli's stomach dropped. He spun, weapon raised. From the dark emerged figures, not slavers, but worse in their own way. Bounty hunters, scavengers, men and women with hungry eyes and mismatched armor, weapons scavenged from every corner of the galaxy. Their leader grinned, sharp and eager. A human, a winged queen, and her little crystal kid, the galaxy's most expensive prize, all in one package. Eli groaned under his breath. "Called it. Goddamn glitter sneezes." Lyra shot him a look that was equal parts exasperation and reluctant amusement. "You are impossible." "Yeah, well," Eli muttered, raising his carbine. "Get used to it." The bounty hunters didn't waste time. Their leader, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward with a grin that promised nothing good. His weapon, a serrated plasma blade, caught the dying light as he twirled it lazily. "Hand over the queen and the boy, human. Walk away alive. Might even let you keep your miserable hideout." Eli raised his stolen carbine higher, squaring his stance. "Not happening." Lyra stepped to his side, her wing folding protectively around Kale. Her gaze was molten fury. "You will not touch him," she said, every word a vow. The bounty hunters laughed, spreading out to encircle them. Eli's grip tightened. His body thrummed with battle readiness, but his mind screamed at the odds. Too many, too armed, and their last fight had already drained them both. Then Kale sneezed. A puff of crystal dust burst into the air, shimmering like starlight. The bounty hunters gasped in unison, greedy eyes locking on the glow. For a moment, the distraction was enough. Eli grabbed Lyra's wrist. "Run!" They bolted. Through the rusted wreckage of the mining outpost, dodging broken beams and collapsed silos. Plasma bolts lit up the shadows behind them, carving holes into metal walls. Kyle clung to Lyra's shoulders, his small cries muffled by her hair. Eli's lungs burned, his ribs screamed, but he didn't stop. Not when he could hear the hunters' laughter chasing them like wolves. At last they crashed into the hollow of a collapsed shaft. Eli slammed a rusted door shut behind them, leaning against it as his breath tore out of him. Lyra lowered Kale gently to the ground, pressing a kiss to his forehead. The boy whimpered, curling into sleep against the cold stone. Silence fell, heavy and tense. Only their ragged breathing filled the air. Eli pressed his back to the wall, sliding down until he sat on the dirt floor. His whole body trembled, exhaustion digging into every muscle. When he glanced at Lyra, he found her staring at him, amber eyes glowing faint in the dark. "What?" he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. She tilted her head, hair falling over one eye. "You keep standing between him and danger," she said softly, "even when it should kill you." "That's what people do," Eli said. "The good ones, anyway." Lyra's lips curved faintly, though there was sadness in it. "There are not many good ones left." They sat in silence for a moment, Kyle's soft breathing the only sound. Eli leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closing, trying to calm the thunder in his chest. He hadn't felt this alive, or this close to death, in years. And sitting beside a woman like Lyra, fierce and radiant even with her wing fractured, his pulse wouldn't settle. When he opened his eyes again, she was still watching him. Closer now. Her hand reached out, hesitated in the air, then brushed against his jaw. The touch was light, almost questioning, but it sent a jolt through him like an electric storm. He froze. "You are scarred," she whispered. Her thumb traced one along his cheek. "But you did not break." His breath caught. He didn't know why, but something in him, something long buried, unraveled under her touch. I should keep watch," he muttered, voice rough. Lyra leaned closer. The faint glow of her broken wing bathed her face in silver light, highlighting the sharp lines, the softness beneath. "We may not see another dawn," she murmured. "Why waste this night pretending?" Eli's heart slammed in his chest. "You don't even know me." Her lips curved into something between a smile and a challenge. "I know enough." For a long, charged moment, the air between them was unbearable. Every breath, every heartbeat, every inch of space felt thick with heat. Eli's hand lifted almost against his will, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Her eyes closed briefly, as if savoring the contact. When she opened them again, she was inches from him. "Human," she whispered, the word suddenly not an insult, but something intimate. "Do you fear me?" "Yes," he admitted, voice breaking, "but not the way I should." Lyra's lips hovered close, warm breath ghosting against his. The tension snapped like a string pulled too tight. He leaned forward, and their mouths met in a kiss that was both fierce and desperate. It wasn't gentle. It was years of solitude crashing against years of survival, two broken souls clinging to fire in the dark. Her lips tasted of salt and smoke, her body pressing against his with surprising urgency. His hands cupped her face, then slid into her hair, pulling her closer. Her fingers dug into his shirt, holding him as though she might never let go. The world outside didn't matter. The hunters, the danger, the war. For that one moment, there was only heat, only breath, only the intoxicating truth that he wanted her and she wanted him. When they finally broke apart, gasping, Lyra rested her forehead against his. "You are reckless," she whispered. "Guilty," he muttered. "But so are you." Her laughter was low, breathless. "Perhaps." For the first time in years, Eli found himself smiling in the dark. They didn't stop touching. Even when the silence of the shaft pressed back in, even when the threat of bounty hunters still lingered outside, neither of them pulled away. Lyra leaned against him, her head resting against his shoulder, her wing folding loosely around them both like a shimmering cocoon. Eli's hand traced the edge of the crystal feathers cautiously, reverently. They pulsed faintly with warmth under his touch, alive, almost like veins of light running through stone. Lyra shivered, a sound escaping her throat that wasn't pain. It was something far softer. "You shouldn't," she whispered, though her body leaned into him all the same. He smiled faintly, brushing his thumb across her collarbone. "You don't sound like you want me to stop." Her amber eyes flicked open, glowing in the shadows. "You are infuriating." "And you're impossible," he countered. Their mouths met again, slower this time, less desperate, more searching. Her lips moved against his with heat that made his pulse stutter, but there was tenderness too, unexpected and dangerous. She tasted of dust and starlight, of survival and promise. Her hand slid to his chest, tracing the scars beneath his shirt. Each one she touched seemed to burn with memory. Battles lost, friends buried, regrets carved deep. But her touch didn't linger on the pain. It lingered on him, on the man who still breathed despite it all. "You hide behind anger," she murmured between kisses. "But it is only because you care too much." He laughed, breathless. "You've got me figured out, huh?" "I see you," she said simply. Her lips brushed his again. "And you see me." The intimacy was overwhelming. Eli had lived years building walls, but here, in this hollow with danger pressing on every side, those walls crumbled under her touch. He wanted her, not just the warrior, not just the queen, but the woman beneath, the one who bled and fought and still laughed in the face of doom. When her hand slipped under the edge of his shirt, warm against his scarred skin, he caught her wrist gently. "Lyra," he whispered, "if we cross this line, there's no going back." Her gaze held his, steady, unflinching. "Then do not go back," she whispered. He kissed her again, deeper this time. And for once, Eli stopped thinking about tomorrow. Their bodies pressed close, tangled in heat and shadows, finding comfort and fire in equal measure. Nothing crude, nothing careless, just two souls who had survived too much, clinging to each other as if the night might take them if they let go. Outside, the desert wind howled. Inside, Eli and Lyra found something worth holding on to, something worth fighting for, something worth breaking every rule of war and exile. And when at last they lay tangled together, her head resting on his chest, Kale's soft breathing steady beside them, Eli realized the truth that had been clawing at him since the moment he saw her. He wasn't just protecting them anymore. He belonged to them. The morning came quietly, as though the desert itself was ashamed of the violence it had hosted the night before. A pale light crawled across the sand, glinting faintly on broken shards of metal. Eli stirred awake to the soft weight pressed against him. Lyra's silver hair spilled over his chest, her breathing steady, her fractured wing glowing faintly as if still dreaming. For a moment, he let himself stay there. The warmth of her body, the gentle rise and fall of her chest against him, the sound of Kale's small breaths nearby. It felt impossibly fragile, a stolen piece, carved out of chaos. He almost dared to believe they might keep it. But peace never lasted, not for men like him. A faint vibration thrummed against the ground. Eli's eyes snapped open. Engines, not distant, not wandering. Closing. He sat up sharply. Lyra stirred, blinking, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "What is it?" "Trouble," he muttered, already reaching for his weapon. He cursed under his breath. Low battery, almost dry. He'd hoped for one more day of quiet. Lyra pushed herself upright, her hair tumbling over her shoulders, her body graceful even in urgency. She reached for Kale, who clung to her, frightened by the tension in the air. Her wings flexed, fractured crystal glowing faint in the dawn. The sound grew louder. Engines, but not the guttural growl of slaver ships. These were sleeker, sharper, cutting the air with precision. Eli's stomach dropped. "Not bounty hunters," he muttered. "Not slavers. Military." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Whose?" Before he could answer, a voice thundered across the ruins, amplified by external comms. "Eli Vance, former captain of the Terran Defense Force. By order of the Council, you are under arrest for treason and desertion. Surrender now." The words struck harder than any plasma bolt. Eli froze, throat closing. He hadn't heard that voice in years. Cold, commanding, sharp as ever. General Oren Dax, his old commander. The man who had once trusted him with lives. The man Eli had walked away from. Lyra's gaze snapped to him, her eyes blazing. "What does this mean?" He swallowed hard. "It means we're screwed." The ground shook as Terran drop ships landed on the sand, their sleek armor gleaming in the dawn. Dozens of soldiers poured out, weapons ready, disciplined, efficient. Not slavers, not greedy scavengers. Professionals. Soldiers who had once been his brothers. And at their head, Oren himself. Broad-shouldered, gray hair cropped close, his face carved from stone. His eyes locked on Eli with something between fury and disappointment. "You should have stayed buried in the sand," Oren called. "Instead, you crawl back into my sights with the galaxy's most wanted fugitives in your pocket." Lyra bristled, stepping in front of Kale, her wings flaring despite their damage. "These are your people?" she hissed. Eli's chest tightened. "Not anymore," The soldiers fanned out, surrounding the ruins. Eli raised his carbine, though his hands trembled. He'd fought slavers, bounty hunters, monsters. But this was different. These men wore the same armor he once had. He could hear the discipline in their steps, see the precision in their formation. Fighting them was suicide. Oren's voice cut through the air. "Surrender, Eli. I'll take you in alive. The woman and her whelp go to the council. They've paid well for crystal wings. Do this, and maybe I'll even fight to keep your head off the block." The words made Lyra's face harden into stone. She looked at Eli as if the ground had just split between them. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew your people hunted us." "Lyra, His voice broke. "I didn't know it was the council. Not like this." She stared at him, betrayal cutting deeper than any blade. "You are one of them." Her words stabbed straight into his chest. He wanted to scream that he wasn't, not anymore, that he'd buried that life years ago. But the truth clung to him like blood. He was human, and humanity had built this machine. Oren's soldiers advanced, rifles raised. Eli's grip on his carbine tightened. He looked at Lyra, at Kale, at the fragile family he'd somehow found in the ashes of his exile. And in that moment, he made a choice. He turned his weapon on the Terran line. The first shot cracked through the silence, dropping a soldier before anyone expected him to fire. Chaos erupted. Plasma bolts lit up the ruins, soldiers shouting commands. Oren roared in fury. "Damn you, Eli!" Lyra moved like a storm unleashed. Her wings, fractured but blazing, deflected shots, shards of crystal scattering like knives. She and Eli stood back to back, their weapons firing, their bodies moving in a rhythm born of desperation. But the Terrans weren't slavers. They weren't mercenaries. They were trained, disciplined, relentless. For everyone they dropped, 3 more pressed forward. Eli's breath tore from his chest. His body ached, his weapon hissed low on charge. Lyra staggered, a plasma bolt grazing her shoulder. Kyle cried out, clutching her arm. The world narrowed to fire and blood. And then, the twist of the knife. A sharp crack echoed. Eli froze. Pain exploded in his side. He stumbled, eyes wide. One of the Terrans stood ahead, rifle smoking. But not just any soldier. A woman. Her helmet half shattered, her eyes visible beneath the visor. Eyes Eli recognized. Cold blue. Eyes he had once known better than his own. "Clara!" he gasped. His voice broke. "No!" She lowered her weapon, expression unreadable. "Hello, Eli." Lyra's head snapped toward him, fury and shock mingling in her gaze. "Who is she?" Eli's heart pounded, blood spilling hot down his side. The world tilted. The twist cut deeper than the wound itself. "She's my wife," he whispered. "My wife I thought was dead." The battlefield froze. For a breathless moment, even the soldiers hesitated, their rifles wavering as the weight of Eli's words cut through the chaos. Lyra's amber eyes blazed, her lips parting as though the ground had been torn from under her. "Wife!" she hissed. The word dripped like venom. Eli staggered, clutching his side, his voice raw. "She was on the last mission, the one that went to hell. I saw the wreckage. I buried what was left. I thought—" His throat closed. "I thought she was gone." Clara stepped forward, her rifle lowering. Her face was older, harder, scarred by years he hadn't lived beside her. But her eyes, those same cold blue eyes, cut through him. "You didn't look hard enough," she said flatly. Lyra's wings quivered, shards trembling as though they might shatter again. "You shared my bed," she spat, voice breaking between fury and betrayal. "And all the while you belonged to another." "It wasn't like that," Eli cried. His voice cracked. "I thought I'd lost everything. And then I found you." He reached toward her, but she recoiled, her face carved with fury. The desert wind howled. Plasma bolts resumed, soldiers pressing forward again as Oren barked orders. But the true battle was no longer between armies. It was in the ruin of trust, the fracture between Eli and Lyra. He turned desperately to Clara. "Don't do this. Don't hand them over. You don't know what they'll do to her, to the boy." Clara's expression didn't soften. "I know exactly what they'll do, and I know you chose her over us." Her voice trembled on the last word, a crack of pain beneath the steel. Lyra's breath came ragged, her fury wrapping around her like a shield. "You lied to me," she whispered. Every touch, every promise. I didn't lie, Eli pleaded. I didn't know she was alive. Lyra, I swear. But words couldn't mend what had broken. Not in that moment. The soldiers closed in, Oren's voice booming. Take them alive! Eli's mind spun, his side bleeding, his heart tearing between two worlds, one he thought buried and one he had just begun to build. Lyra's betrayal burned in her eyes. Clara's accusation cut him deeper than the wound in his body. And as the Terran soldiers closed the circle, Eli realized with sick clarity that no matter what choice he made next, someone he loved would see it as treason. The desert had never felt so small. The ruins trembled with the sound of Terran boots. Oren's soldiers pressed closer, rifles raised, their shadows long in the harsh morning sun. Eli stood caught in the middle, one hand pressed against his bleeding side, the other clutching his carbine like it could still save him. But nothing could save him from the way Lyra and Clara stared at him. Lyra's amber eyes burned with betrayal, her fractured wings flaring in fury. Clara's blue gaze was colder, more precise, like she was dissecting him down to the bone. Between them, Eli felt like a man standing on a minefield with both women waiting to see which step would blow him apart first. Eli Vance, Oren barked again, his voice carrying across the ruins. Drop the weapon, or we'll cut down your alien whore and the freak child right here. The words sliced through the air. Lyra hissed, her wings trembling with rage. Kyle whimpered, clutching at her leg, his golden eyes wide with fear. Eli's heart cracked. He turned his carbine slightly, aiming at Oren. Say that again, he growled, his voice low, deadly. Oren sneered. You always were too sentimental. That's why you failed command. That's why you ran. Clara's voice cut in, sharp. Stop this. Eli, for once in your life, stop fighting and think. Lyra spun on her, her wings flaring so wide they brushed the crumbled walls. And you, wife, would have me chained and carved apart, like livestock? Clara's jaw clenched. I serve the council. If I disobey, they'll burn me too. Then burn, Lyra spat. Better ashes than chains. Eli groaned, dragging a hand down his face. For God's sake, not now. Could you two please not murder each other while I'm still trying to survive this? Both women turned to glare at him in perfect, terrifying unison. He raised his free hand weakly. Right, shutting up. The awkward tension was thick enough to choke on. Soldiers shuffled uncertainly, caught between Oren's barked orders and the bizarre domestic argument unraveling in front of them. One young recruit muttered under his breath, are we supposed to shoot or— Shut it! Oren snarled. Eli's pulse hammered. He needed a plan, something insane enough to buy them breathing room. His ribs throbbed, blood soaked his shirt, but adrenaline burned through him. He shifted closer to Lyra, lowering his voice. We can't win this fight head-on. She glared at him, voice dripping venom. I do not fight beside liars. Lyra, Clara cut in sharply. Don't listen to him. He'll drag you down like he dragged me. Dragged you? Eli snapped, his patience fraying. I thought you were dead. And if I were, Clara shot back, you'd still have managed to betray me from the grave. Lyra's lips curled. Perhaps she knows you better than I do. Eli groaned again. Perfect, just perfect. Two of the deadliest women I've ever known, and both of them want to kill me before the soldiers even get the chance. A plasma bolt cracked past his head, slamming into the wall. The soldiers had grown tired of waiting. Oren raised his blade, shouting, Take them alive if you can, but dead will do. Chaos erupted. Eli ducked behind rubble, dragging Lyra and Kale with him. Clara raised her rifle, firing into the Terran line. But Eli couldn't tell if she was shooting at her own men or warning shots to herd them closer. The battlefield blurred, smoke and plasma filling the air. Lyra fought like a storm reborn, her fractured wings scattering shards of light that ricocheted off armor. Eli fired until his weapon clicked dry, then grabbed another from a fallen soldier. In the midst of it, Clara pushed through the chaos, her blue eyes locking on Eli. Come with me, she shouted over the fire. You can't win this. The council will kill them both, unless we make a deal. Lyra whirled on her, eyes blazing. He is not yours to take. Eli clenched his jaw, rage twisting in his chest. I'm not a prize to argue over, he shouted, even as he slammed a rifle butt into a soldier's helmet. Then stop acting like one, Lyra snapped. Despite himself, Eli barked a laugh. Raw. Bitter. God, I missed having women yell at me while people tried to kill me. Not the time, Clara growled. Never is, he muttered. The battle pressed closer. Orrin himself stepped forward, his black plasma blade carving the air, shouting orders. His soldiers pushed in tight formation. They were being crushed. Eli made his choice in a heartbeat. He grabbed Kale, slung the boy over his back, and sprinted for the broken stairwell leading deeper underground. This way, he roared. Lyra hesitated only a moment before following, wings shielding them from fire. Clara cursed, then covered their retreat, firing controlled bursts that dropped two soldiers cleanly. The stairwell groaned under their weight, collapsing behind them as they plunged into the dark. The underground shaft smelled of rust and stale air. Eli stumbled through the dark, Kale clinging to his neck, Lyra's glow illuminating the crumbling walls. Clara brought up the rear, her rifle trained back on the stairwell. At last, they skidded to a stop in a wide chamber, an old mining hub, long abandoned. Rusted drills loomed like skeletons, broken conveyor belts stretched into shadow. Eli dropped Kale gently onto a slab of stone. His body shook with exhaustion. He pressed a hand to his wound, blood seeping between his fingers. Lyra rounded on him instantly, fury sparking again. You never told me about her, about them. You let me... Her voice cracked, fury warring with something more fragile. Lyra, Eli rasped, voice raw. I thought she was dead. I thought everyone from that mission was dead. I buried pieces for God's sake. I didn't know. Clara's voice cut sharp. You never looked hard enough. You ran instead. That's what you do, Eli. Always running. He glared at her. And what, Clara? You just decided to show up now, working for the same bastards selling people like her for parts? Clara's jaw tightened. I survived. I did what I had to do. Lyra's wings trembled, her fury spilling over. And what of Kale? Would you sell him too? The chamber fell silent. Clara's eyes flicked to the boy, his golden gaze wide, his fractured wing glowing faintly. For a moment, her face softened. Then she looked away. I don't want him hurt, she said quietly. But if it's him or me or us, I'll choose us. The words shattered what little thread of trust remained. Lyra surged forward, her crystal edges catching the light. If you touch him, I will tear you apart. Eli threw himself between them, groaning as pain lanced his side. Stop! For God's sake, stop! We've got soldiers hunting us, a psychopath with a blade, and an entire council that wants all of us dead or chained. Could we maybe hold off on killing each other for 5 minutes? The silence was so tense it hummed. Lyra glared past him, her chest heaving. Clara's rifle remained half raised. And then, Kel sneezed. A puff of crystal dust sparkled into the air, drifting between them. Eli stared at it, then let out a strangled laugh. Perfect. Just perfect. Galactic war crimes on one side, interspecies custody battle on the other, and the kid still sneezes glitter like we're at a damn festival. Lyra blinked, then, despite herself, snorted softly. Clara rolled her eyes, the faintest curve tugging at her lips. For one brief, absurd heartbeat, the tension cracked. Eli sank down against the stone, exhaustion pulling at every bone. If anyone asks, this isn't the dumbest way I've nearly died, he muttered. Lyra tilted her head, wings folding slowly, reluctantly. Nearly, he smirked faintly, blood still dripping down his side. Still breathing. Give it time. Despite the danger, despite the fury, despite the impossible triangle now crackling between them, a fragile thread of humor hung in the air. And in that moment, Eli realized something terrifying. He might just survive the soldiers. He might even survive Orrin. But surviving Lyra and Clara together? That was going to be the real war. The glittering dust from Kale's sneeze drifted down like starlight, catching in the stale air of the abandoned mining hub. For a moment, it was absurd enough to disarm the tension. Eli slumped against the stone, blood dampening his shirt, and Lyra finally lowered her wings, their fractured glow dimming. Clara's rifle sagged in her hands, but the peace was brittle. Outside, the muffled thunder of Terran boots echoed faintly, a reminder that Orrin and his soldiers hadn't stopped hunting. They were regrouping. They would find the shaft soon. Eli forced himself upright, swaying. We can't sit here. They'll pin us in. We need an exit. Lyra's gaze flicked to his wound, her expression a storm of fury and concern. You are bleeding too much to run. Bleeding less than I will be if Oren finds us, Eli muttered. Clara stepped forward, her eyes sharp but conflicted. There's a maintenance tunnel. I saw it on approach scans. It leads to the surface, 3 clicks east. Eli studied her, suspicion gnawing. And what's waiting at the other end? A council patrol? Her jaw tightened. Maybe, maybe not. But it's better than dying down here. Lyra's amber eyes narrowed. Why should we trust you? Because I'm your only shot, Clara snapped. Like it or not. Eli's head spun. 2 women, one who had been his wife, the other who had become his salvation, and both ready to tear each other apart while soldiers closed in. He pinched the bridge of his nose. God help me, I miss the days when my biggest problem was fixing a broken water recycler. Cal tugged at Lyra's arm, his golden eyes wide. Mother, he whispered in his tongue, voice trembling. Lyra softened, pulling him close. Eli swallowed the ache in his chest. Whatever else happened, the boy came first. Fine, Eli said, pushing off the wall. Lead the way, Clara. But if you sell us out, Lyra's voice cut sharp. I'll kill you myself. Clara didn't flinch. Get in line. They moved quickly, shadows twisting around them as Clara guided them deeper. The tunnels groaned with age, rust and dust falling with every step. Eli stumbled often, his vision blurring, but Lyra's hand was there each time, steady and firm. Even through her anger, she didn't let him fall. At last, a faint draft brushed against their faces. Clara pointed. There, that's the exit. Relief flickered. Too soon. The tunnel ahead erupted in light as soldiers poured in, their rifles blazing. Oren's voice thundered from behind them. End of the line, Eli. Eli cursed, shoving Cale behind him. Lyra spread her wings wide, shards of crystal deflecting bolts. Clara spun, rifle barking, dropping 2 soldiers cleanly. Chaos swallowed the tunnel. Plasma fire tore through the dark, screams echoing. Eli's body screamed with every move, but he kept firing, kept standing. Beside him, Lyra was a vision of fury, her hair wild, her broken wing glowing with every strike. Clara fought with brutal precision, cold and efficient, but Oren was still coming. His blade burned black, cutting through the tunnel walls like paper. Eli! Lyra shouted, her voice desperate. He turned just in time to see Oren charging, the blade arcing toward him. Too fast, too close. And then Clara moved. She shoved Eli aside, taking the strike across her chest. The plasma blade burned deep, tearing through armor, searing flesh. She screamed, collapsing against the wall. Clara! Eli roared, dropping beside her. Her blood steamed in the air, her breaths shallow. Oren sneered, raising his blade again. One down, one to go. Lyra's scream split the tunnel. She hurled herself at him, wings blazing brighter than ever, light flooding every crack. The clash was apocalyptic, black plasma against crystal fire, sparks raining like stars. Eli dragged Clara back, his heart tearing. She coughed, blood staining her lips, blue eyes locking on his. Don't waste it, she rasped. Don't waste the chance. Then her hand fell limp. Eli's chest hollowed out, rage and grief twisting into something unbreakable. He rose, grabbing a fallen rifle, and fired with everything he had left. Each shot cracked with fury, each breath a promise. Beside him, Lyra struck with the fury of a queen defending her child. The tunnel shook, crumbling under the force of their fight. Oren snarled, his blade slicing arcs of shadow. But Lyra's wings caught the light, shattered though they were, and for the briefest moment she blazed like the legends of her people. Eli seized the chance. With a roar, he fired his last shot. The bolt punched through Oren's chest, searing him to the wall. His blade sputtered, then fell silent. The general's eyes widened in shock, then glazed over. His body slumped. Silence. The tunnel groaned, dust falling in sheets. Lyra staggered, her glow dimming, her breaths ragged. Eli caught her before she fell, Kyle clutching at both of them with shaking hands. They had won. Somehow, impossibly, they had won, but at a cost. The 3 of them stumbled into the dawn, The eastern exit opened onto rolling dunes, the first rays of sunlight bleeding across the desert. Eli carried Kale, his muscles trembling with exhaustion, while Lyra leaned against him, her fractured wing dragging a faint trail in the sand. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed in a roar of dust and stone, burying Orin and the soldiers forever. Clara's sacrifice sealed it. They stood there breathing the cool morning air, the world eerily silent after so much chaos. Lyra turned to him, her face pale, her eyes unreadable. "Your woman," her voice cracked. "She gave her life." Eli's throat tightened. "She wasn't my woman anymore," he said softly. "Not after what I found here." He met her gaze, amber locking with steel blue. "Not after you." Lyra's lips parted, her wings trembling. For the first time since the storm, her fury softened. "You are still a liar," she whispered. "But perhaps you lie for the right reasons now." Eli managed a faint smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." Kyle tugged at her hand, his golden eyes shining. "Mother," he whispered. She pulled him close, holding him as if she'd never let go again. Eli watched them, his chest aching with something he hadn't felt in years. Belonging. For so long he'd been a ghost in the desert, waiting to die. But now with them, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. He looked out over the endless dunes. "The council won't stop," he said quietly. "Not after this." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Then we make them." Her words rang with conviction, her broken wing glowing faintly in the rising sun. She looked at him, a question unspoken. Eli nodded. Together. The sun climbed higher, casting gold across the sand. For the first time in years, Eli felt the warmth not as a burden, but as a promise. They walked into the dawn, wounded, haunted, but unbroken. A human exile, a queen with fractured wings, and a child who sneezed starlight. Against all odds, they had found each other, and in a galaxy built on chains and fire, that was enough to start a revolution. In the end, what does it mean to be human? To fight for survival, or to fight for each other? Eli, Lyra, and Kyle remind us that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, love and sacrifice can rewrite destiny. If this story gripped your heart, share it with others, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss the next tale of passion, war, and the impossible bonds that change everything.